For being a feeling that we all deal with, I think lust doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And even when it gets talked about, a lot of that conversation goes to you should avoid it at all costs. You shouldn't find yourself in that situation. You shouldn't find yourself feeling those feelings. When in reality, everyone deals with it. Everyone at one time or another, whether they're just going through puberty or whether they're a full-grown adult or maybe even middle-aged as the years go by, they deal with lust to some degree. And when you boil it down to that, I think the conversation with lust is rather that we should learn from it. We should learn from it. We should learn what pitfalls we have, how to avoid them, and how to deal with those feelings so that the next time they come up, they don't necessarily impact us as hard as they have in the past. These last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time alone, and that's partially because I've been so busy doing a lot of work. And a lot of my friends have been busy with a lot of work, so I haven't been able to do a lot of things outside. Not that I've stayed inside the house 24/7, near 365 in this case. I've been able to go out and still work from time to time. I'm still maintaining everything for myself. But it's been a long time of reflection. A long time recently of inner conversations, inner build-ups, inner tearing downs, building new habits, and so on. And the idea of lust was one, especially in my case, being someone who uses social media a lot, was a recurring topic. And more so not just feeling that, because I'm not going to say I haven't, but from a different perspective, from a questioning perspective, from a point of view where I'm detached from that and the overall process and seeing it from an objective sight. Because as someone who's only 23 years old, I've dealt with that a lot. I've dealt with lust a lot. I think of it as, the last decade or so, and you think back to how long a decade is for me, 23 back to 13, that's 8th grade-ish, end of middle school, about to get into high school, where I've dealt with that, and probably, even though I haven't understood it, and at that time didn't understand it for myself, it might have been going on for much longer rather. I've talked about it time and time again, where I would fall into this routine where every year for school, new classes, new setup, I would fall for some girl. There would be some girl that would cross my eye one way, and I'd be like, okay, she looks pretty cool. I would have some form of general relationship, not like actually girlfriend or not, but I would just be a general person in their life for a year, and then, the following year, everything would reset, and then the cycle would start up again. And now when I look back on that, as much as I know, and as much as I probably will in the future talk further in detail for it, I don't know if that feeling that I felt when thinking of these girls, and, as college happened, these young women, I don't know if I ever actually loved any of these girls. I don't know if I loved them, but rather I loved the idea of them. And from a lustful perspective, those thoughts come into mind. They come into your head. And it's easier to just have that happen. There's a reason why there's two different words. There's lust and there's love. They're different in their each way. And when you think of love, you have to go so much deeper than just, oh, this person looks good. Or, hey, I like what this person does. That can be what draws you to someone, but there's so much more. You have to cut to a much deeper level. You have to talk about what you both want out of life, what you want for your future, how you both communicate as people and with each other if you get to that point where you're going on dates and deciding whether or not a relationship is something that you both want. Lust is easy. You could just look at someone, think they're pretty, and go on with your life. They don't live in your head rent-free. It's fleeting. You know, the main difference between the two, you know, lust is fleeting. Love, at one point or another in your life, will be foundational. But in my perspective, when you put that now into my life, where lust is fleeting, let's say, I don't know if I've ever actually loved a girl or a woman. I know I like women. I've talked about it pretty frequently, but have I ever loved a woman? Well, I don't know. If we're judging me by my standards of how lust is fleeting, maybe I haven't been loving these girls and these women. I've been loving the idea of them and lusting over them, and when you get to do that and you keep it to yourself, maybe you only tell that you have these feelings to a few of your close friends, which in my case I want to do a video about in the future. I stopped doing for a few years, for a little bit at some point, and only more recently was I able to push myself to be back open about that because of the patterns that grew from me being honest about that. But that's a good question. Have I ever loved someone? Have you ever truly, fully loved someone? Or are you stuck in loving the idea of them and these people? Because there are multiple, you know, it's not just one person of the opposite sex or the opposite gender or whatever identification there is that you see. And if you're on social media, you will see a lot of different people, and you will see their perfection. You know, I'm not going to go too deep in it, but maybe for girls, let's say they could take 50 photos, choose photo 36 where it's completely perfect and they have everything dialed down and looking good to a T, and they post that. You don't see frames 23, 24, 25, or maybe they're not looking exactly at the camera, or maybe they might have some form of wrinkle on their face or some insecurity, some part of themselves that they just look at and they're irked by, and that they say, oh, I don't want to put that up there. I'm not saying guys don't do that too, as I'm someone who takes a lot of photos, and you know, I've been using cameras for some time. But when you look at love and look at lust, lust is seeing that frame 36 and loving that frame 36. Love is maybe being with said person when they take those 50 shots, when they see 24 through 25 through 26, and maybe they just shake their head each time, but you're seeing that process. You're seeing that process, and something as I actually wrote down. I've been doing some writing recently, and proverbially I was sitting on this, so proverbially and actually, and I'll read it out right now. And I think this, where it came up to me in my head, I think it's a really good representation of love versus lust. Here's a basic test to see if you truly love them or simply lust over the idea of them. Do you know their eye color off the top of your head? You might hear that as I go sit on it again. And you might think, oh, Kyle, what's the point of that? That makes no sense. Well, look at it back through the lens of love versus lust. Lust, and especially looks on that factor, as this wind maybe might not want me to talk about this right now, is about the outside looking in. There's so much that's good. Whereas love is about finding those details, finding those intricacies about some person, whether they be good or bad, and still loving them in the process. With that question in mind, I think back to all the girls and the women I've liked over the years. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what any of their eye colors were. That doesn't make me a bad person necessarily. But when you put that back into this frame of love versus lust that we're building, and if you apply it to your own life, I think that's a good benchmark to set when you get to the point where you start to decipher what side that you're on. And social media and the internet in general, I think, with all the content that's out there, normal and explicit, and these different websites all around the spectrum, especially if it's just pictures or if it's videos, it's all about the looks factor at points or another. I'm not saying everything is looks, but a lot of it has to do with looks. And if you're on social media constantly, you can get caught up in the idea of seeing people like this and seeing and thinking, oh, this is exactly how they are 24/7. Spoiler alert, that's not how it works. You know yourself. You live through all of the things that you do and that your body does. And you are probably disgusted by something or some things that you do at one point or another. Well, you're not the only one who goes through that. Everyone goes through that. We go back to love versus lust. Lusting is maybe seeing that video, seeing that picture, and believing that that's who they are 24/7. Loving is getting to a point where you're living with that person one day and seeing that they're just another human being. Seeing that they are kind of like you. And in some cases, they are exactly like you. Maybe they might be completely different and they're not 100% like you. But seeing that in person, seeing the flaws, seeing the imperfections, and still choosing them, that's love. Love isn't liking a girl down in the Florida Keys posting like a carousel of bikini pics. That's not love. That's lust. You like it. Maybe you're swiping through and you're thinking, okay, she looks really good. And then you go on the scroll. You go back on the scroll. Probably 5 minutes after you did that, that doesn't even cross your mind anymore. That's lust. Fantasizing yourself over the idea of being with someone just because you had one or two interactions with them, as coming from someone who's done that before, that's not love. These same people you're having those feelings for, you could decide to try and take that next step. You can try to have those interactions with them, and it could be completely dry. It could be the Sahara Desert for all I know. They could be giving you 1 word, 2 word, maybe 3 word responses where you're trying to keep the conversation going. And when that's the case, you should know that love isn't there. I'm not saying it won't be there in the future, and I'm not saying that you need to try and try and try and try again for someone. That can be a little too much. I was talking to one of my friends one day, and we were talking we're both in this same situation where, guys who just graduated from school, recently graduated, we're trying to make our ways in the workforce, wherever we are, whatever areas that we work in. And he's also someone who talk about and do a lot of stuff on social media. We're on social media a lot. We're sending stuff to each other a lot. And, there are times where he's like, it's kind of hard. He's on the apps as well. He's trying. He's going for it. I'm someone, I don't really do it. Maybe I lament about it on here, but I never actually want to put myself in that perspective. And I told him something, not just my original idea. I've heard it countless times before. I paraphrased it to him. What we need to do as people, do the work and get to a point where people are reaching out to us. I'm not saying this just for guys. Girls can do it too. I'm not trying to say that this is an exclusive answer for someone, an exclusive answer for a certain group, for an exclusive population. My perspective, and I'm in the process of doing it right now, you have to do the work and keep doing the work, because when you do that work and you continuously put in that effort, you will get to a point where people are interested in you, and eventually someone will come along where they are really interested in you, to the point where you might even be like, wait, really? Like, that interested? I didn't think I was that interesting. Maybe because you have to do some more work and not necessarily talk to yourself in that way. But you have to put in effort. Part of that effort, whether it be physical working out, whether it be reading, whether it be actually going out in public and talking to people, because you aren't going to get someone by simply just standing in the corner in the club. That's not how it works. Unless you're Batman. And even then, you might not be able to even see Batman if he's standing in the corner of the club. That's not how it works. But if you build yourself up, if you work on yourself, and that includes learning the difference, like you're doing right now, between love and lust, and learning from lust, that is the key. Because you've probably felt this before. You've worked with people who maybe in your eyes, if you compare yourself to them, which by the way, comparison is the thief of joy. If you didn't know, now you know. And you might think you look better than them. You might think that you're better off than them. And they might be also in a relationship with someone for well over a year, and they are, at least on social media, consistently happy. And, off social media, they're two human beings. They're not going to agree on everything. So maybe there are fights. Not too crazy. Disagreements, I would say. And then you look at yourself and you're like, how do they have someone and I don't? Well, at the end of the day, it's partially learning that difference between what love and what lust is. Learning from lust as you deal with it, so you know that once that future comes where you're with someone, it doesn't affect you then, because the other part of once you find yourself in a relationship is showing up every day. I haven't experienced that quite yet. When I do, I want to talk about it one day. Find the differences and put yourself out there. Put yourself out there when you're incomplete. Because, by the way, you're always going to be incomplete in one way or another. It's just up to someone seeing you as someone much more than their imperfections. I'm tearing up. I don't know if it's probably from the wind. I'm not actually crying right now. But that's exactly what you need to do. What we as a society need to do. We need to put ourselves out there, understand when we lust over someone as compared to loving them, find our fits. Once we find the fits, keep working every day to maintain it. And when you get to do that, you'll be on your path to a very solid life. Not just in your own personal way, because you've done the work and you know what you know about yourself and the world, but also that you found someone to do this with. Bonus content. Yeah, I don't know why I was tearing up there. Oh man, it got really windy, so I hope the audio is fine. I was hearing it and I was trying to like yell into the mic. But yeah, this has been on my mind for a little bit. I'm happy I got it out. And maybe next week we talk about one of these specific situations that happened to me in middle school or high school, because that's how I've gotten to this point from dealing with these situations that have happened in my past. So that might be what's on tabs for next week. March is looking good outside, at least today. Said today was going to be as high as 57, and it feels like 27. So the weather lied completely. But yeah, we're getting to that new corner of the weather. I think I mentioned last week how I'm so happy for it, and I can't wait to do some different things with that. But in this case, I'm still talking to you. I can't wait to keep talking, and I can't wait to be outside doing it. Bye now.